Is it possible for a young woman to just vanish from her family holiday on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean? Well, buckle up and let's talk about it, because today we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Amy Lynn Bradley. Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of Murders and Mysteries with Moon. I am Moon, if you couldn't already tell, and this is something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, but only now have I decided to bite the bullet and give it a go. So thank you for everybody that's watching, and please just bear with me. As a first video, this might not be as clean as it could be, but I'm going to try my hardest. I do just want to start by giving a disclaimer that this video is for informational and educational purposes only. While I do strive to ensure accuracy, I cannot guarantee that this video will reflect the most up-to-date versions of the case, and it may not include all of the details of the case. I am not intending to trivialise or glorify any of the victims, their families, or the individuals involved in this case. True crime is a very sensitive subject, and I aim to approach it with the utmost respect and care. All opinions that I express in this video are mine and mine alone. Amy Lynn Bradley was born on the 12th of May 1974 in Petersburg, Virginia in the United States, to her parents Ron and Ivor Bradley. Amy lived in Chesterfield County, Virginia, with her parents Ron and Ivor and her younger brother Brad. Amy was described by her loved ones as being an all-American girl. She was beautiful, she was athletic, sporty, bright, and many of her loved ones have noted that she had the most stunning green eyes. Amy Bradley attended Longwood University in Farmville, Virginia, and she graduated with a degree in physical education, or PE, if you're a UK girly like me. And during this time, she actually came out to her parents as gay. Word has it that they weren't too thrilled about her coming out, but we'll get more into that later. Whilst Amy was enrolled at university, she actually trained and worked as a lifeguard, and she was praised for and was very proud of her strong swimming skills, which makes this case just that little bit more sad. So getting into how the family ended up going on this cruise, her father worked for an insurance company and he actually won an all expenses paid vacation on the Royal Caribbean cruise called the Rhapsody of the Seas. At first, Amy wasn't keen on the idea of going on this cruise because she wasn't too taken on the thought of being out in the open water, and cruise ships are absolutely ginormous, and that was kind of intimidating for Amy too. A lot of people say that a cruise liner is like a whole city on the sea on a boat, so she was a little bit intimidated by that. According to more recent interviews and statements given by her family members, Amy had both acrophobia, which is the fear of heights, and thalassophobia, which is the fear of deep and large bodies of water. So you can imagine that a cruise probably wasn't Amy's ideal thought of a holiday. But that being said, eventually her family did convince her to come along with them on the cruise, especially considering her younger brother Brad was coming home for college to go on the cruise with them. And it was supposed to kind of be just the last family holiday that they went on before Amy and her younger brother Brad kind of got into full-time adulting. So on March the 21st, 1998, the family arrived in San Juan, Puerto Rico. They went and did some shopping in San Juan and sent some postcards before boarding the Royal Caribbean liner Rhapsody of the Seas, at which point they set sail for their first stop, which was in Aruba. So on March the 21st, 1998, when Amy Bradley was 23 years old, the family arrived in San Juan, Puerto Rico. They did some shopping whilst they were in Puerto Rico, bought some film for their cameras because Amy was actually a keen amateur photographer and she was entering a photography competition. And also she said that she wanted to make a picture collage for her coffee table in her new apartment. So they bought 15 rolls of film, which is a lot of film, and they sent some postcards to family and friends before boarding the Rhapsody of the Seas and setting sail for their first stop in Aruba. So 2 days later, on March the 23rd, 1998, the Rhapsody of the Seas departed Aruba and headed for the Dutch Caribbean island of Curacao. I think that's how you pronounce it, but I'm not 100% sure, so apologies if I have pronounced that wrong. So that night on March the 23rd, Amy and her younger brother Brad stayed up late partying and dancing at the ship's nightclub with members of the ship's band, which was called Blue Orchid. One of those members was the bass player, Alister Yellow Douglas, who seemed to have taken quite a shine to Amy on their time on the cruise ship, but we'll get more into that later when we discuss some of the theories. So that night, Ron and Ivor Bradley, the parents of Amy and Brad, reportedly went to bed at around 10 p.m. while Amy and Brad stayed up partying, as I said before. And apparently Ron woke up at around 3:35 a.m. on the morning of the 24th when Brad re-entered the cabin. Apparently, according to Ron, Amy followed very shortly after at around 3:40 a.m. where they had a very brief discussion. Amy said she was feeling unwell due to the motion of the ocean, the motion of the boat, so she was going to sleep on a sun lounger on the balcony in order to keep getting fresh air because she thought that would make her feel better. So at that point, Ron and Brad both went to bed and went back to sleep. Ron Bradley said he then woke again at around 5:25 to 5:30 a.m. and said that he looked out onto the balcony, and from where he was, he could see Amy's lower half, kind of from the hips down. He could see her legs and her hips still on the sun lounger, and he said it looked like she was either resting soundly or she was sleeping soundly, so he just went back to sleep. Strangely though, only 30 minutes later, Ron woke up again at 6 a.m. Ron reportedly said that something awoke him, and at which point he noticed that their balcony door was open 14 to 16 inches, which he got up to go and have a look, to pull it closed, and it was that point he realised that Amy was gone. At first, Ron didn't panic because it was 6 a.m. He assumed that maybe Amy had left the cabin early or she'd gone to get some breakfast. She'd gone to take some photographs of the sunrise with the camera. So he went and searched the ship for her himself, assuming that he'd be able, to find her and then go back to the room, wake the others up and they could start the day. But after searching the ship, he was unable to find Amy, and it's at this point that he returned to the cabin and woke up Ivor Bradley and Brad Bradley to let them know that Amy was missing. After realising that Amy was missing and that they couldn't find her anywhere on the ship, the family immediately spoke to the captain of the cruise liner, who was reluctant to make an announcement yet because at that point it was still quite early in the morning and he believed that making an announcement on the loudspeaker system would be a nuisance and an inconvenience to the other passengers on the cruise liner. So the first announcement for Amy Bradley, which asked her to report to one of the desks so that they could reunite her with her family, That didn't go out until around 8 a.m. that morning, at which point the ship had just docked in Curacao, and despite the family's pleas to lock down the ship until Amy was found, by that point most of the passengers on the ship had already disembarked for the day to go and explore and enjoy the island of Curacao. Unfortunately, there was no response to this announcement, and so eventually the captain did order a search of the ship at 12:15 p.m. on the 24th of March 1998, at which point the crew members searched all 10 decks and all 999 rooms of the cruise liner, and they found no sign of Amy anywhere. After continued pressure from the family, a search was launched by the Dutch Caribbean Coast Guard that lasted until the 27th of March 1998. This search used every single member of the Coast Guard unit that was available. They also had 3 helicopters and used radar planes to assist them with the search, but sadly no sight nor sound of Amy Bradley was ever found in that search. So on that day, the 27th of March 1998, the Rhapsody of the Seas departed from the island of Curacao to continue on to their next destination, at which point the Royal Caribbean Company actually did charter a separate boat to stay in Curacao and continue the search for Amy Bradley. The Bradley family naturally cut their vacation short as soon as they realised that Amy was missing, and they departed from a airport to fly back home to the US to be with their family and to set up a call centre and to continue with their search efforts to find Amy, to reach out to anyone that they could think of that may be able to help them find their daughter. So at this point we can start talking about the theories of what happened to Amy Bradley. So what we have is that she was last seen by her father on the balcony of their cabin on the cruise ship at 5:30 a.m. approximately, but then by 6 a.m. that same morning on the 24th of March 1998, she was gone, which leaves us with a window of 30 minutes in which Amy had just vanished into thin air. So the first theory that many people believe is that she was kidnapped and sold into the illegal human trafficking ring in the Caribbean. The evidence that supports this is, there's quite a few things that support this. It's just a case of whether or not you believe that it's enough. So one of these pieces of evidence is that in 2005, some photos were emailed to Amy Bradley's family from an anonymous source, and they contained photographs of a woman that bore a striking resemblance to Amy Bradley. And these images were found on a Caribbean-based adult-only website under the name of Jazz. Now, a forensic detective did analyse these images and do comparisons between obviously last known photographs of Amy and the photos of Jazz that the family received, and she described them to be a perfect match based on facial and body features that do not change over time. This was looking at things such as her ears, her widow's peak on her forehead, her nose structure, cheekbone structure, and things like that. However, unfortunately, the IP address of this website could not be traced, and any of her unique identifiers, such as her tattoos and her piercings, were not really visible on these photographs. So the images that were sent to the family could never solidly be confirmed to be Amy Bradley. Another piece of evidence that supports this theory is that there was a US Navy officer called Bill Hefner, and he claims that he encountered Amy Bradley in a brothel in Curacao in 1998. Now, Bill says that this lady came to him along with another lady and 2 men, at which point the 2 men went off to the bar to get drinks. The other lady disappeared for a moment. I don't know whether it was to join them at the bar or to go to the bathroom, at which point it was just him and this woman left at the table, at which point he claims that the lady told him her name was Amy Bradley. She said that she had left the Rhapsody of the Seas to purchase drugs and was now being held against her will. Apparently, before anything else could be said, the 2 men returned from the bar to the table and quickly ushered the woman away. Now, Bill Hefner says that he didn't report this at the time because he didn't want to be dismissed from the Navy for being in an unauthorised area, because it wasn't actually allowed for him to be in a brothel while he was serving in the Navy. So he didn't report it mainly for that reason, but also he claims that he had no idea that there was even anybody missing, so it didn't strike up in his head. He didn't recognise the name, he didn't recognise the face at that point in time, so it didn't scream out to him. He just thought that it was maybe another person's excuse to try and get some money or something out of him. He finally did report this only after he had retired from the Navy, and he happened to see Amy's photograph and her story in a magazine, at which point he called up straight away to tell the FBI about this encounter with the woman that he believed to be Amy Bradley, and that he said claimed her name was Amy Bradley. The most recent piece of evidence that actually supports this theory is another one from 2005, the same year that those awful photographs were emailed to Amy's family. A woman named Judy Mora, I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but she reported seeing Amy in a department store bathroom in Barbados. She was in the bathroom, in the cubicle, door locked obviously, and she said that she heard a woman enter into the bathroom accompanied by a male voice, at which point the male voice told her that a deal was taking place at 11 a.m. and that she better be ready. Eventually the man left the bathroom, so it was just the 2 women, and Judy came out of the cubicle and saw the other woman at the sinks crying, visibly upset. She asked this lady some questions. She asked what her name was, at which point she said this woman said her name was Amy. And Judy said that she could hear a kind of southern accent and knew that she wasn't from the area. So she asked her, are you here on holiday or do you live here? Apparently, the lady called Amy just said no. At which point Judy said, I can hear you've got a bit of a southern accent. Whereabouts are you from? To which the lady Amy replied that she was from Virginia. Shortly after that, though, before anything else could be said, the men returned to the bathroom and Judy made a very, very swift exit, considering these men were glaring at her, and so was the woman that claimed to be Amy. So Judy, politely said, excuse me, I better get going, my husband's waiting for me. And she said that when she left that department store bathroom, she saw the men with their arms hooked under Amy's and essentially dragging her out of the store. At which point she said to her husband, those men are making that young woman do something that she doesn't want to do. And her husband told her, there's nothing that we can do. It was only after seeing the episode that Dr. Phil did with Amy Bradley's parents, Ron and Ivor, that Judy decided to call the FBI to report her encounter, at which point the FBI did fly to Barbados to investigate the lead, but unfortunately nothing was ever found to support it, and Amy still hadn't been found. The next most popular theory is that Alister Yellow which was his nickname, supposedly because at some point he had dyed his hair a very, very bright shade of yellow, so he dubbed the nickname Yellow. But at the time that this case took place, Alister Douglas was bald. But if I refer to him as Yellow, at least now you know why. But yeah, the other main theory is that Alister Douglas was somehow involved in her disappearance. Now, the main evidence to support this theory is that the evening before / the very early hours of the morning that Amy went missing, she had been dancing very closely at the ship's nightclub with Alister, and this was actually captured by an amateur videographer who was taking videos to compile for his colleagues. As they were all on a company vacation, it was his job to record what was going on so that they could make a video to remember it, so each of them could have a copy. And he captured footage of Amy dancing with Alister in the nightclub. There's quite a few different clips of it actually, and the two of them did seem rather close. Now, Alister Douglas claims that he parted ways with Amy Bradley and returned to his room around 1 a.m. Though apparently his key card didn't show him re-entering his room until gone 3 a.m. that morning. But either way, he says that he wasn't involved and he parted ways with Amy for the evening and left the passenger area and returned to the crew area to his bedroom. And that was the last time he ever saw Amy. However, 2 passengers that were on the upper deck of the cruise ship report seeing Amy and Alister getting into the glass elevator together at around 5:45 a.m. on the morning of the 24th. Then they claim that around 6 a.m, a very short time later, they saw Alister returning to the upper deck, but he was alone and he walked straight past them. Now, this story couldn't actually be confirmed because the 2 girls that say they saw Alister and Amy together didn't have their key cards with them. They left their key cards in their cabin with their mother, who had let them back into the room, so there was no trace left by the key card of them re-entering the room because a key card was never used. So unfortunately that timeline couldn't be confirmed, so that was really the only bit of evidence that would confirm that after Ron reported seeing her still asleep on the balcony at 5:30 that morning, that she had then left the room to meet Alister and had gone with him in the glass elevator. So it is truly, truly unfortunate that that timeline could not be confirmed, because that would have been a key piece of evidence and it probably would have brought the whole case together. As I said before, Alister Douglas claimed that he parted ways in the early hours of the morning of the 24th with Amy Bradley, and he returned back alone to his own room. Now, in a recent interview on YouTube, he took part in an interview and he reported that at 7 a.m. on the morning of the 24th, he received a phone call from the security team asking if he had a woman with him in his room, to which he replied no, because it is forbidden. And he also asked the security team, why are you asking? And they then told him that the girl he'd been dancing with that night, Amy Bradley, was now missing. Now, Alister did voluntarily undergo a polygraph test with the FBI. Now, there is conflicting statements about whether or not Alister passed this polygraph or whether the results of the polygraph were inconclusive, but either way, he was released by the FBI and cleared of any kind of involvement, as the FBI have stated that there was no evidence to connect him to the disappearance of Amy, especially considering that timeline. Obviously, those 2 girls that said they saw them together at around 5:45 a.m, that could not be confirmed, so really they had no reason to keep him. So he was released by the FBI. Amy's brother Brad actually wonders still to this day if Alister had something to do with Amy's disappearance, because he claimed that on the morning of the 24th, Alister had approached him and said, "Hey man, I'm so sorry to hear about what happened to your sister." At which point Brad remembered thinking that was very strange, considering no sort of announcement had gone out yet. The only people that knew Amy was missing was the captain, the security crew, and the family themselves. So that always stuck out as very strange to Bradley, that Alister somehow knew that Amy was missing. However, if you believe Alister's story and recollection that the security team called him at 7 a.m. that morning to ask if he had someone in his room with him, that could very easily explain how he knew before any of the other passengers knew. This theory that Alister Douglas was somehow involved also expands to kind of involve other crew members. Specifically, there was an unknown waiter on board the Rhapsody of the Seas that had taken a very keen interest in Amy. He was paying her extra special attention, so much so to the point that her family had joked, "Well, if you want anything, just tell them that Amy wants it because it'll get here twice as fast." Now, he reportedly had said that he wanted to take Amy out drinking off of the ship on the island of Aruba to a bar called Carlos and Charlie's. Now, interestingly enough, Carlos and Charlie's is actually the same bar that another young woman called Natalie Holloway went missing from. So I can do a video on that down the line if anybody's interested to hear about that one, but a lot of people thought that that was a very strange coincidence that he had specifically said he wanted to take her to this one bar, and it's now a place where another girl went missing. However, Amy did decline this offer, and her mother reportedly said that she was like, "No way, I am not getting off this ship and going clubbing with, some random men." So I don't know how much kind of weight that theory has, that potentially he was involved, but anything is possible. Now, many people speculate, including either Bradley, Amy's mum herself, that there was some sort of a group effort between Alister Douglas and other crew members, including that unknown waiter, to drug Amy and smuggle her off of the ship through a crew-only exit in some sort of a suitcase, a laundry basket, an equipment container. Considering Alister was part of the ship's band, there probably was some sort of equipment case that would be big enough to fit Amy into it. Now, this theory is supported by a Canadian tourist called David Carmichael, who was in Curacao in August 1998. He was scuba diving, trying to get some footage of the marine life, just having a great time. And he claims that he saw Amy Bradley on a beach in Curacao. Now, he said that the woman approached him very, very urgently, and it looked as though she had been about to say something, but before she had a chance, she was ushered away by two men. Now, later down the line, David Carmichael identified one of these two men as Alister Douglas. Now, David Carmichael's main reason for being convinced that this was Amy Bradley was that he claims the woman he saw on the beach in Curacao in August 1998 had a Tasmanian devil tattoo on her shoulder that matched one that Amy Bradley reportedly had. I have a lot of things to say about this tattoo, because in pretty much every single interview I watched and every single article I read, this tattoo was described as a Tasmanian devil. Now, I don't know about you, but I very commonly associate the Tasmanian devil with Taz from Looney Tunes, the brown character that turns into like a tornado when he gets mad and destroys everything in his path. Now, however, from photographs that I've seen of Amy Bradley, the tattoo that she had on her left shoulder was actually of Dizzy Devil, which was a Tiny Toons character and it was Taz's son, but it wasn't Taz. Now, Dizzy Devil was purple, wore like a helicopter hat. I don't know what they're called. But it was Dizzy Devil was a very far cry from what most people, including myself, would assume was the Tasmanian devil. I think if I had it my way, I would be drawing a lot of attention to that. And I think it could play a huge part in reported sightings to have that distinguishment between Taz and Dizzy. Because when you're reading the missing posters and you see the unique identifiers that say Amy has a tattoo of Tasmanian devil on her left shoulder, my brain would instantly go, oh, so I need to look out for a woman that's got a brown Taz tattoo on her shoulder, not, oh, I need to be on the lookout for a woman that's got a purple Tasmanian devil in a helicopter hat on her left shoulder. I would just really like to draw some added attention to that, because the fact that in every single article and every interview I watched, it was incorrectly described. I believe that could be the difference between, you know, a case of mistaken identity and actually seeing Amy Bradley. This makes me wonder whether David Carmichael actually just saw a young woman on a beach that had a tattoo of Taz rather than a tattoo of Dizzy, and that it was just a case of mistaken identity. The FBI did fly out to investigate this lead, but again, they found nothing and no evidence of Amy. So when it comes to that theory, it's my personal belief that that was a case of mistaken identity, but I did just want to use that example to kind of draw attention to the fact that I think her tattoo is incorrectly described in pretty much every bit of information that's out there. And I think it could be very important to distinguish between the two different characters. Now, another theory, it's not one of the more popular ones, but it is still a theory that circulates out there, is that Amy was murdered and thrown from the ship. Now, there's no real evidence to support this theory. I mean, unfortunately, the cleaning crew had already been into the rooms by the time the FBI arrived on board the ship, so there was nothing in terms of any forensic evidence to support the fact that Amy may have been murdered and thrown from the ship. The only evidence that could potentially support this theory is that in 2010, a human jawbone washed up on an Aruba beach. Now, originally, this jawbone was actually thought to have belonged to the girl I was talking about before, Natalie Holloway. However, forensic analysis was done and dental records were used, and it was confirmed that this human jawbone did not belong to Natalie Holloway. However, for some very, very strange reason, further tests to see whether or not this jawbone could have belonged to Amy Bradley were never actually conducted, which I think that's really strange. I'm not trying to say there's some sort of a conspiracy going on or anything like that. I'm just curious as to why no further tests have been done on this jawbone to compare them with Amy Bradley. I mean, I'm sure she has dental records that could be used for comparison. I just think it's very, very strange. The only reason that I could think of for this not happening is that she didn't have any dental records, but most people do have dental records, and I find it very hard to believe that the family haven't pushed for these tests to be conducted, because to this day they are still searching for their daughter. Now, another quite popular theory about what happened to Amy Bradley is that, unfortunately, she voluntarily jumped from the ship and committed suicide. A little bit of evidence that does support this is that when the FBI investigated the cabin, they found that the balcony that Amy had last been seen on, where her dad Ron had seen her asleep on the sun lounger, the little table that was out on the balcony had actually been pushed right against the railing. So it is a possibility that she could have climbed up onto that table and then jumped over the railing and overboard. Now, a lot of people think that she could have potentially been in a heightened emotional state due to all the drinking that she'd been doing the morning of / the night before. And you may remember earlier I mentioned that she came out during college to her family. She came out as gay, and that, reportedly her family weren't very happy about it. Now, this is one of the main reasons why people think that she may have committed suicide. One of her ex-girlfriends claimed that her father had actually written her a full 3-page letter that expressed his disapproval and his disappointment in her sexuality, and that reportedly he gave her a very, very hard time. However, Ron has since said that although it wasn't what, and I quote, it wasn't what he would have chosen for his daughter, that apparently they didn't give her a hard time at all about being gay and that they loved her regardless. Now, her ex-girlfriend is adamant that the family aren't as supportive as they are claiming that they were about her coming out as gay, but unfortunately this is all just kind of hearsay, so we cannot confirm whether or not Amy may have been receiving a lot of aggravation and a lot of negativity from her parents about her sexuality. Now, the only other real suspected reason that people believe Amy may have committed suicide comes from another ex-girlfriend of hers called Molly McClure. Now, the two of them were dating, and while they were dating, Amy actually confessed to Molly that she had kissed another girl while she was drunk. At which point, upon receiving this news, understandably, Molly asked for some time and some space to kind of process that information, and she stopped answering Amy's calls. At this point, Amy then sent Molly a message in a bottle, which was asking for her forgiveness. The letter held a heart-aching resonance with the fact that she went missing at sea. And just for an example, an excerpt from the message in a bottle said, "I feel like there is an ocean between us, like I'm on a desert island waiting for you to rescue me. A message in a bottle is my only hope. I miss you, Molly. Save me, please. Stranded, Amy." Now, many people have speculated that this letter may have had a deeper meaning, that it may have been some sort of eerie premonition, or maybe even a suicide note that was left in advance. But this theory can kind of be discounted on the basis that in the days before the family actually boarded the Royal Caribbean cruise, Molly and Amy had rekindled their relationship and they planned to start afresh once Amy returned from the cruise. Amy even sent Molly a postcard from San Juan, Puerto Rico, that unfortunately Molly didn't receive until she'd already got the news that Amy was missing. And the postcard stated that Amy wished Molly was there, which is just, it's so sad, isn't it? Just imagine they could have started afresh when she got back from the cruise and she just never came back. It's just heartbreaking for everybody involved. Now, the majority of Amy's friends and family are adamant that Amy was not suicidal and that the theory that she may have committed suicide is just out of the question. A lot of people stated that they drew onto the fact that she had just adopted a bulldog puppy. She'd just adopted a dog. She'd got herself an apartment. She was due to start a brand new job at a computing firm when they came back from the cruise. So it just didn't make sense that she'd have done all these things and had these things lined up if she was then going to commit suicide on a cruise. It doesn't make sense to them. I mean, I know you never know, and the people that do tend to commit suicide never show any signs. The families and loved ones always say the same thing, like there was absolutely no signs, they were happy, they loved life. I mean, you really never do know, so it definitely cannot be completely discounted, but that's up to you to decide. Now, the simplest and arguably the most popular theory about what happened to Amy Bradley is just that she tragically fell overboard from the balcony of the ship. This is the theory that I personally believe, and I'll tell you for why. These are my reasons. So Amy had been drinking in the hours before her disappearance. Now, if you remember me saying that when she returned back to her room that morning, she had a discussion with her father where she said that she was feeling seasick, and that's why she was going to sleep out on the balcony, because the fresh air was helping her. Now, I believe that she either leaned over the balcony railing or she climbed up onto that table. I mean, you remember me just before saying that the table on the balcony had been pushed right against the railing. So I believe she either leaned over the balcony railing or she climbed onto the table and leaned over the balcony railing to vomit. And she tragically lost her balance and toppled overboard. Now, whether this is due to impairment from the alcohol or whether it was down to the movement of the ship, that's all just up for debate and hearsay. But I just want to draw on the fact that it is commonly said that the ship was docked. Like, when I was researching for this case, I came upon a lot of things online where people were saying that the ship was docked at the time that Amy disappeared, so that there was no movement on the boat, whereas this isn't actually true. Her family have confirmed that at the time she would have vanished, the ship was approaching port, but it hadn't yet docked. It didn't actually dock until approximately 2 hours after Amy went missing. So in my opinion, it is perfectly plausible that a large wave or some sort of roughness from the ocean would be enough to knock Amy off balance and for her to tragically fall overboard. Now, another reason that I believe this theory is that I mentioned earlier that Ron Bradley, so he woke up at 5:30 a.m. approximately and said he could see Amy's lower half still on the sun lounger on the balcony. He went back to sleep, and then a very short time, only about 30 minutes later at around 6 a.m, something woke him up again, which is when he noticed Amy was gone. Now, I believe that what Ron actually heard, that something that woke him up, was some sort of evidence of Amy either vomiting or falling from the railings and from the balcony. Whether it was a bang, whether it was a brief cry, whether it was just the sound of vomiting. I mean, as a parent, I know that the slightest noise can wake you up when your child is crying or being sick. Like, it's like a sixth sense is activated when you become a parent, and you instantly wake up at any sound that's out of the ordinary and that isn't normal. So maybe in his groggy, half asleep state, he didn't realise or fully process what it was that he was hearing. He just remembers that he heard something. Now, maybe his subconscious did realise kind of what he'd heard, and that's why he immediately, as soon as he woke up, went to check on Amy. Like, when he woke up, his eyes immediately went boom over to the balcony, noticed that the door was open, and that's when he realised that Amy was gone. I just find it strange. I mean, yeah, I don't know. I just find it strange, but that's up to you whether you want to agree with me on that one, whether you think I might just be talking rubbish. I mean, there is also the possibility that his brain went into protection mode and blocked the sound from his memory, so that, he's in denial and he doesn't remember what he actually heard. I mean, our brains are capable of rewriting painful memories and altering them to a better version. But personally, I just think that a space of 30 minutes between when she was last seen asleep on the sun lounger to discovering she was missing, I just think it's too short of a time frame for any of the other theories to really be possible. If we take it as gold that he saw her at 5:30 a.m. for a fact, and then woke up again at 6 a.m. and she was gone, that's only 30 minutes. Now, I can't imagine her leaving the room, being drugged and kidnapped and smuggled off the ship in a space of 30 minutes. That's just a bit of a far stretch for me. I can't see that happening. It's a very short amount of time, especially without anybody seeing or hearing anything. Now, the same thing applies for the theory that she was murdered and thrown from the ship. Like a 30-minute time frame, you know, it just doesn't sit right with me. I just don't believe that in a 30-minute time frame she would have left the room, encountered somebody and got herself into a situation where she could have been murdered and then thrown from the ship. It just isn't really plausible to me, whereas it is more than enough time for her to accidentally fall from the balcony and into the ocean. It only takes a very brief amount of time. It takes a split second to lose your balance and to go toppling over. I mean, I personally think that people discounting the theory that she fell overboard just purely based on the fact that a body has never been found and a body never washed up is just completely ludicrous. I mean, many people fall overboard from ships and are never found. I mean, just for example, the Cruise Lines International Association released some data that between 2009 and 2019, 212 people fell overboard. And out of those 212 people, only 48 of them were successfully recovered. If you want to put that into a percentage, that's about 20% were recovered. And it's also worth bearing in mind, I know a lot of people discount the possibility of her falling because they say that the rails on these cruise liners are quite high. It is worth bearing in mind it has been confirmed by the family that the railings on the cruise liner in 1998 is much shorter than they are on modern cruise liners. So anybody that's been on a cruise recently looked over the balcony and thought, no, there's no way somebody could fall over this. Back in the day, apparently they were substantially shorter. So it is a possibility that she could have toppled over, especially if you consider the table being pushed against the railing. Despite nobody ever being recovered, Amy Lynn Bradley was declared as legally dead on March the 24th of 2010, which was 12 years after her disappearance. No official cause of death has been listed, but her family believes that Amy is still alive and that she is out there somewhere, and the FBI themselves are still offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to the recovery of Amy or to the people responsible for her disappearance. But I want to hear your theories. Like, what do you think happened to Amy Bradley? Like, do you agree with one of the theories that I've talked about in this video? Do you have a different theory that I haven't mentioned, a different one to one of the ones I've spoke about? Because I'm deep diving into this case right now. I've gone down a rabbit hole. Like, I'm here for all of the other theories. Like, any theory you have, I would love to hear it. So please do leave it down in the comments because I will be checking them, I will be reading them. But please, like I said in my disclaimer, let's try and keep it respectful down in the comments because this is a very sensitive subject and there is the possibility that Amy's friends and family may come across this video, so let's just try and keep it as respectful as we can. But yeah, I want to hear your theories. I hope you enjoyed this first video. I hope it wasn't too bad for a first video. I really tried. I mean, I've struggled because there's a fly. You've probably seen it a few times while I've been talking, like flying past my face. There's a fly in the room that I can't get out. It's currently sat on the ring light mocking me. So that's been really, really irritating for me. But I have tried my best. Also, I need to come up with a better, like, research method, because I couldn't even read my own writing when I was trying to talk through this case. And I was really struggling to remember a lot of the key points that I had written down. And I feel like I've gone off on a tangent in some areas, but you know, we move. I'm working on it. I'm sure it'll get easier as time goes on and I'll get better at telling these stories. But either way, thank you so much for hanging out and bearing with me. And if you made it to the end of the video, if you watched the whole thing, then I appreciate you and I adore you more than you can possibly imagine. If there is any case in particular you want to hear next, please also leave that down in the comments, because down there in the comments, because I will be posting a new video every week. That's going to be my schedule for the time being. I'm going to post a new video every week. So if there is anything that you want to hear me talk about, if there's any cases that you think don't get enough coverage, or cases from around your area that you'd love to hear about, then leave it down in the comments and I will do my best to cover it if I can. Don't forget to give me a like, give me a thumbs up and subscribe so that you never miss a video. I will see you next week. Thank you for coming to the first episode of Murders and Mysteries with Moon. Stay spooky. I'll see you next week.